Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Charleston Gaines, your corporate emotional intelligence trainer. We're talking about how to prevent domestic violence utilizing emotional intelligence. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to have my soul sister here with me. She is love and light in my life, Tara Murney. How you doing?
I'm amazing now that we got through the tech issues. I
Yes.
know Shanae Murray is probably watching this and she's like, but I'm glad we made it through. So I really, really am looking forward actually to this conversation. I'm trying to stream on some other platforms as well. So go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell me why this is important to you, because I think this is a really hot topic. Actually, I just put up a poll on LinkedIn yesterday um, asking if anybody had experienced domestic violence. Yes, no. Are they actually experiencing it themselves? Do they know someone? And I've only had it up for a day, but I've received so many private messages, Charleston. I haven't had the opportunity to tell you about it, but it's really, really important that we discuss this today. So take it away.
Well, you said you put the poll up yesterday.
Yeah.
And of course, I saw it. I responded that I know someone now who's experiencing that, and she's really unable to get out of it. But I want to tell you a quick story about it before we jump more into our topics. But when I was in Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, right? I was in the Air Force for 20 years, and we would run these exercises. We practice war. We were a fighter wing. We'd always practice, I don't know, fighting North Korea, whatever. And so when we did that, there was this young woman who would come over from another section, and she would work in our section. And she was real cool. And I actually feel bad that I don't remember her name. But because, I mean, this was 2005, that's my excuse. But she, this was sad. This affected, all of our units, hundreds and hundreds of us that knew her very well. She got orders and was reassigned to North Dakota. We found out that shortly after she got to North Dakota, she was involved in when I say involved is not the right word. She was a victim of murder suicide.
Oh my gosh.
Her husband took her life and then took his own.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's the thing that people don't often recognize about domestic violence is we're not just talking about a couple of people in an argument.
That's right.
And here, like 17 years later, I still think about her because I don't know the details of their marriage, but I know she did not deserve to die.
Absolutely.
And when someone commits a murder suicide, that's usually not the very first instance of violence in that relationship.
Absolutely.
And so that's why we're talking about proactive prevention of domestic violence today using emotional intelligence, because what we want is to go beyond just being reactive. Instead of saving people's lives at the end, let's prevent them from having those emergencies. And so emotional intelligence enables us to do that either as someone who's being victimized by the violence or someone who may be a perpetrator of violence. And so the first thing I want to talk about is just um, the self-awareness aspect. And then when I'm done, Tara, if you could just jump right in. But um, when I think about the self-awareness aspect, I think about when you are very angry as a perpetrator, when you're very angry and you may be on the verge of committing an act of violence, you have to understand why.
Yeah.
Why am I so angry? Be aware of and be able to evaluate your behaviors in the moment. It's one thing for me to feel anger. Anger is an emotion. There are no bad emotions.
That's
But
right.
when that anger translates to violence, I have to be able to figure out, why am I losing control? What is really going on with you? Because you probably do not want the other person to feel pain or harm or be injured. But what is it about you? It's no one else's fault. You have to take responsibility for yourself. What is it about you that is driving you over the tipping point towards violence? And self awareness is a way to evaluate yourself and answer those questions prior to going over that tipping point and enacting violence on someone that you're supposed to love.
Yes. Yeah, I think that emotional. So we know the six components of emotional intelligence. And for anybody who is not familiar with who I am, my name is Tara Murney. I'm a intelligence coach, an emotional intelligence coach. I usually work with entrepreneurs, conscious leadership. That's kind of my wheelhouse. But there's six components, just for anybody who's new to emotional intelligence and isn't quite aware. There's the emotional self-awareness, there's the assertiveness, there's the empathy, there's the interpersonal relationship, the stress tolerance, and then there, of course, is the impulse control. And so that emotional self-awareness is key. So before we did this, like I'm a huge researcher, you know that, Charleston. And so I did my homework for like weeks trying to find as much literature as I could. And to date, really, there is almost no literature specifically addressing the relationship between domestic violence and emotional intelligence. And it's really, really hard to find. I did find two studies, though. And it's been recorded. This is one thing that they have come to agree upon, that it's been recorded that individuals involved in domestic violence actually have lower EQ scores than those that live in a healthy relationship. And it's also been shown that men, specifically, it was directed towards men, that abusive men just are unassertive. And because they lack the skills and the competence really to express their needs, they use the intimidation and aggression to obtain what they want. In addition, male batterers appear to be unable really to communicate in the emotional context of intimate relationships. And they seem to lack verbal skills to express power and the emotional needs. So, in other words, batterers are unable to verbally articulate their feelings, their thoughts, their needs, and their emotions in a non destructive way. And so, I think this really comes down to, I was looking forever how to tie these two together, but it really does come down to the core components of emotional intelligence. And I know that you live in this arena. So this is like the perfect time to have this conversation, because when I did this poll, and I see the numbers coming in, and it's only been out for a day. I'm going to let it run for 7. There are a lot of people that are suffering, especially coming out of a pandemic. Like the numbers are astronomical, and these people were locked in for 2.5 years without any help. So let's give them, I want to give them some valuable tips that they can take away today. Maybe some strategies, and of course, definitely some resources. You're in the States, I'm here in Canada. I have tons of them. I won't be able to give them here on the live, but I will put them below live into the comment section for anybody who needs help and is looking for somebody to connect with. I'll definitely do that after. So what do you think about how they tie together? Because we have our own lane and we have our own experiences, and I think it plays a massive role, actually.
Well, it the two tie together really in so many ways,
Yes.
right? So if you were to just ask how does emotional intelligence tie into domestic violence, well, we can have an 8-hour workshop on that. but
Absolutely.
but one thing for me that you said that was really important that people need to understand is when you talked about the perpetrators or aggressors using aggression and intimidation.
Yes.
And so, and that's important because people need to understand that there are many different forms of domestic violence, and it's often called interpersonal, no, intimate partner violence as well. But, and so when you look at that, why are you using intimidation? Why are you using scare tactics? And that goes back to the self awareness. And a lot of times, what it is for individuals is there's this kind of an integration of insecurity and a
Yes.
need for control.
Yes.
And so self awareness is recognizing that you need that. And for a lot of people, they have that in other areas of their lives, and they want to have that at home. They feel like the home is where they really should be more in control, have more power, and they don't.
Absolutely.
So, well, how do I get that power? Through intimidation and aggression. And that can be in the form of mental and emotional abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse. There's so much more abuse other than actual physical violence. And a lot of people look at domestic violence in a form of, a lot of abusers, I will say, look at domestic violence in the form of, well, I didn't hit her. I didn't hit him.
That's right.
And well, you're still abusive. and
That's right.
and men are victims as well. And another problem we're seeing, of course, is as more people are able to come out as homosexual, it's male on male and female on female, because no one is immune to this. No one's immune to domestic violence. However, as we're saying here, emotional intelligence enables you to protect yourself from being either the victim or the perpetrator.
Yes, absolutely. And also domestic violence shows up as things such as like limiting access to children, right? We see that a lot. I have a lot of friends that are going through that right now, currently, especially coming out of the pandemic, limiting access to friends and to resources. And that right there is like being stuck in a cage, right? Stuck in like hell for how many years. And so they don't have the option to reach out for help because that resource is taken away from them. And so I think it's really, really important to note too, especially for the viewers who aren't aware, there's a lot of factors in play here. There is individual factors. So things like low self-esteem, low education and income, young age, aggressive or delinquent behavior as a youth, heavy alcohol, drug abuse. There's depression. There's suicide attempts. There's anger and hostility, which you were talking about. There's the lack of non-violent social problems and problem-solving skills, right? There's the antisocial personality traits, which actually attribute to a lot of the domestic violent cases. There's poor behavior and control, there's impulsiveness, but there's also relationship factors. So, relationship factors are like relationship conflict includes things like jealousy, possessiveness, tension, divorce, even separation, dominance and control of the relationship by one partner over the other. There's unhealthy family relationships and interactions. I'm sure many of us have those. There's parents with less than a high school education. These are all noted factors that actually take a huge key role in domestic violence. And then there's community factors, and a lot of us don't take this into account. But communities with high rates of poverty or limited like education and economic opportunities, you'll see higher domestic violence cases there. Communities with high unemployment rates, communities with high rates of violence and crime. Communities where neighbors don't know how to look out for each other. There's that low community involvement among the residents. And then there's communities with like easy access to drugs and alcohol and weak community sanctions. So these are all factors that take play. There's even societal factors, cultural norms, right, that support aggression towards others, or societal income inequality, weak health, education, economic, social policies, like those kinds of things. These are all huge factors. And I think we don't really talk about it enough. We really need, if you look at the statistics, they're actually quite frightening. So, and then there's protective factors. And that's really what I really wanted to kind of lean into a little bit today. I'm looking across my screens because I'm trying to stream on different platforms. Shanae would be very, very proud of me. But I really wanted to talk about some protective factors. So we can weave that into the emotional intelligence as well. But if you're looking at like specifically protective factors for intimate partner violence perpetration, so having strong social support networks, like stable ones, right? Positive relationships with others. This is where I really want people to start to focus on. And then community factors. I live in an amazing community. And this is where we all feel connected to each other and we're all involved. And, the coordination of resources and services amongst communities here in Canada, especially in Ontario, where I'm from, there is an abundance of resources and community agencies. And obviously, communities with access to medical care, mental health services, stable housing, feeling safe, and communities with access to economic and financial help. These are all factors in helping, they're protective factors. And so I really want to talk about that. I'm not sure what it's like in the States. I am aware, I've done a lot of research. You guys do have a lot of agencies for people to reach out to, but not a lot of people do. And I'm wondering if it's got any correlation to the emotional intelligence factor. What do you think about that?
Well, really, what you're saying is every aspect of your life is integrated into and impacts every other aspect of your life.
100%.
And so when we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're talking about the person that you are, who are you bringing into every situation? Because your level of self-awareness does not go up or go down from one place to the other.
That's right.
However, there may be times where you're unable to apply that emotional intelligence because you're in a threatening situation.
That's right.
And so I may be more aware of my behavior, my actions, my values out and about, but at home, when you're being abused, that part of your brain isn't as active because you're in survival mode. One thing that we found in research, even involving children, is when children are in a place that they no longer feel safe, it's hard to feel safe in that place again. And the same thing happens to victims of domestic violence, where if you have been violated, say in your kitchen,
Right.
it's hard to feel safe in your kitchen again.
That's right.
And so some people are triggered in some places more than others, whereas you were sexually abused in the bedroom, it's hard for you to sleep in the bedroom. And I bring up sexual abuse because sexual abuse does happen in marriages. Nobody owes anybody else any kind of sexual anything.
That's right.
It's consent is always at play. Consent, the issue of consent never goes away. So there are rapes and sexual abuse within marriage. But looking at proactive prevention, and you brought up the community, it's so important because a lot of people look at what's going on in my community. And when they're looking outward at what's going on in my community, they often don't recognize that they may be the answer
Yes.
to what's going on in your community. And I'm not talking about everyone putting their money together and building a community center. I'm talking about you maybe looking at the social media accounts that go with your neighborhood, or if you have some kind of app, or just the people around you, reaching out to people, because the things that you spoke of kind of, well, they tie back to loneliness.
Yes.
If you feel like you don't matter, if you feel like nobody cares, you are more vulnerable. I'm going to say an easier word. You're more vulnerable to being a victim because you feel like you don't matter. You feel like nobody cares if I'm being abused. If you have a strong social support network, you have people to talk to. And if you're not the one being victimized, you can be proactive. You can be proactive speaking on or about domestic violence. For example, I'll just put this out there. I'll challenge the listeners. How many of your friends and family, how many of your connections across all social media have ever seen you post something about your opinion about domestic violence? How many of the people that you know have ever seen you say, I support Domestic Violence Awareness Month? I am opposed to people hitting their spouses. I am opposed to financial abuse. People that know me know that I stand up for people who have been victimized. I've been a sexual assault victim advocate. I've been just directly involved in violence prevention, child abuse, domestic violence, suicide prevention, and they know this about me. All of you probably feel the same about those topics as I do.
Yeah.
Do your friends and family know that? I challenge you to be proactive and to let your friends and family know that you are an ally, that you are an advocate, and you will fight for them so that they don't have to fight alone. I'm getting a little excited. I'm gonna try to calm
No,
down.
100%. I love that point. And so we don't really talk about it as much as we should. And not a lot of people, especially even in my family, know that I'm an advocate for that, or human trafficking or sex trafficking. And I think our voice matters a lot. And that isolation part is key. It's also, I'm going to tie that into the frequency because you know me, I can't help it.
Yes.
But when we're not, so let's back up for a little bit. So there has been research that has shown that emotional intelligence, well, it notices that it's favorable when it comes to understanding how to kind of avoid domestic violence previous to going into a relationship, even previous to marriage. And it's really important because these people have a competent understanding of themselves, right, in relations to others. You and I both know that. And as well, they really adapt and cope to their environments. And so I think it's really important for people listening that you really take the time and the opportunity to learn more about self-awareness within your own self, and to really dive deep and learn how to express and to articulate your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, your needs, all of that stuff in a non-destructive way before entering into a relationship. And actually, funny enough, I just had a girlfriend of mine yesterday say, well, her and her friends usually like to, when they start dating, they get into the heavy stuff first to see how someone's going to respond and to react, so that they can learn how to deal with their emotions appropriately right off the hop. Now, I'm not saying go and piss off your partner immediately and strike a nerve like that, but it is really, really important to be really self-aware for yourself. And I think by really dabbling in that state, in that beautiful landscape of emotional intelligence where I live and I love, you are really able to not only be aware of your own emotions, but you are aware of the people around you, which is super, super key. And it's about you, not in a selfish way, but you know that your needs, your emotions, everything comes first, and that you're not looking to go into a relationship because you're looking for somebody else to fill something that is missing from you. So, and that is a key of emotional intelligence. You and I both know that. And so it is really, really important that people really lean into this emotional intelligence. I've heard things like it's not measured, it's woo woo, it's this, it's that. But I work with corporations and businesses, completely off topic from domestic violence, but to see the growth, to see the success, to see like the unity of everybody and the empathy for the people that they're around. And that is a huge component. And we can pull that even into domestic violence. Like I look at the people, I feel bad for the victims, of course. 100%. But I also feel bad for the perpetrators because they were never taught somewhere along the lines, and it usually stems from childhood. Maybe their parents didn't fulfill their needs. They weren't taught, especially boys. We know this. We talk about this all the time. It's that man up mentality. It's that you can't express your emotions. And so they don't even know how to articulate them. They don't even know what they look like, they feel like, and they get frustrated. And out of that frustration comes a lot of violence and abuse, unfortunately. So, and I know you work with a lot of men, and I know your background. And so you know what I'm speaking of. And I really hope that there are men on here that are listening actually and are starting to maybe sit back and say, hey, maybe I'm not responding the proper way. And women. We're not saying that it's always women, because statistically it is more women than men, but there are a lot of men that are actually abused and are stuck in relationships. And so that is super, super important to talk about.
It really is, and my mind is all over the place. I'll say this: when we talk about men who have been victimized, and we talk about masculinity and hypermasculinity, I remember I had a friend in the Air Force. He's military, so we were both in the Air Force, and there was a woman that I was seeing who was good friends with him. And so one day they went to the store, and then when they got back to his place, his wife looked out the window and saw them. So his wife knew the other woman, who was my girlfriend at the time, but his wife did not recognize her from looking down from the second story apartment. So his wife looks out the window and sees my husband is being dropped off by some other woman. What's going on?
Right.
When he walks through the front door, she stabs him about a half dozen times. We found this out from, after he was at the emergency room. And then the response is, I should have done this. I should have done that. The response was all of the things that
Yeah,
he could have done differently to prevent himself from being stabbed. And a lot of that is because he's the man and he should have been in control.
that's right.
And he refused to look at himself as someone who was innocent and didn't deserve it.
That's right.
And that mentality that he had is common among abuse victims.
Absolutely.
When we're talking about using emotional intelligence to prevent ourselves from being that, what we don't often realize, and this goes back to what you were saying about being able to express your emotions, what we don't realize is sometimes we can create barriers to our partners expressing their emotions.
Absolutely.
And you use the key word, empathy. Now, if you are a barrier to your partner expressing their emotions, that does not mean you deserve to be abused. It's two different things.
Absolutely.
You never
Absolutely.
deserve to be abused. But if there is, and I'm going to say this specifically to women, If there is a man in your life, husband, boyfriend, whatever, and this applies to your sons as well, helping them to elevate their emotional intelligence as they grow, they need to know that it's okay if they cry in front of you.
Yeah,
They can see you post on social media that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay for men to cry. But then when your husband cries, you look at him like you're disgusted, like he's weak. And that teaches him to never be emotional in front of you.
that's right.
And so you have to be able to be authentic and available and say that it's okay. What are you feeling? And allow them to express themselves without judgment and communicate to them that you care and that you understand without judgment. And then they know that expressing their emotions authentically and fully in front of you is okay because you have offered a safe space.
Without judgment. That is the key part right there, Charleston. It's without judgment.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Let's be honest, it's very difficult to do these things without judgment. You have to
Yep.
practice. When we talk about emotional intelligence, we're not saying to take a course and turn it on. We're saying that you have to practice it.
Yep.
And for me, the fundamental aspect of practicing self awareness is in any given moment, especially the tough ones and the very positive ones, even when you're celebrating, be able to identify and label what you are feeling and why.
That's right.
The word that I'm feeling right now is rage. What is something positive I can do? What is something negative that comes out of my rage? And if you can answer those questions, you position yourself to make better decisions.
Yep.
That,
100%.
yeah.
So you do believe, you and I are both on the same page, that emotional intelligence can actually be proactively used to prevent domestic violence.
Yeah, well, definitely proactively, because what happens is domestic violence. Domestic violence is a result; it's a symptom.
Yep.
Emotional intelligence allows us to impact the cause of that symptom. Your loneliness, your insecurity, your need for control and power. When you're in a culture of hypermasculinity and you're insecure and afraid and lonely in that culture, it is a natural animal instinct to resort to violence to save yourself.
100%.
Emotional intelligence helps you understand I'm feeling this way right now. And the self regulation aspect enables you to recognize I may feel this way, but I do not have to be violent in this moment.
Absolutely. So, I was reading a whole bunch of literature, and I was reading one of the studies actually that came up, and they had come to the conclusion that a lot of symptoms of the violence in relationship occurs usually typically before they even enter marriage, right? And so,
Yes.
and it's really worth noting and mentioning that emotional intelligence may be actually a factor in preventing the psychological violence in the relationship. And as far as the individuals experiencing the domestic violence, where that's concerned, it's established that they try and defend themselves applying 7 universal strategies. And I'm not sure if you're aware of those. I knew of 5 of them. I just learned the other 2. And they're things that really are counterproductive. Like and I know many couples actually that have been in relationships where I've actually witnessed them trying to do these strategies, but they never come to, like, it's never a healthy strategy, because it's like the battered woman syndrome, and it keeps going on and on. They try and talk to the perpetrator. Now, if you're not regulated in your emotions, right, and you don't have that self-awareness component, it's like falling on deaf ears. You and I have both, I'm sure, experienced that with other people. They try to extract promises from their partner, which is absolutely almost impossible to do when you're not aware of your emotions, or you're in a state of rage or in a state of anger. They try to, non-violently threaten the perpetrator, which never works out well. They try to hide. They use passive defense, and they use avoidance and counter violence. Now, if I were to look at this, standing back from my perspective, I know that if it was somebody who's really well rooted in emotional intelligence, had done and is still continuing to do the work, none of these 7 universal strategies would ever take place, because they actually wouldn't put themselves in the situation to have to deal with that. And so when it comes to couples together, I'm very curious what is your opinion on how to build or cultivate better emotional intelligence within the partnership. What does that look like for you?
Well, it begins with, of course, both people elevating their self-awareness.
Right.
And so when you're talking about different ways that people will try to defend themselves in the moment, one thing they have to be able to ask themselves is, what am I feeling right now and why? And then what happens is when you get to the why am I feeling this way? Oh, because that person is raising their voice at me and they look scary when they do that. Then what you have to do is you have to set a boundary.
That's what I was
And you
looking
have to
for.
know that you are worthy of enforcing that boundary. The boundary is not for people outside your home who never do that to you. People will say all the time, I never let anybody disrespect me. And then under their voice, under their breath, they can say, except my husband, except my
Accept.
wife,
Yeah, accept.
right? They get exceptions. They can be mean to you. They can be abusive to you. So you have to set those boundaries in a relationship. There can be the screaming, the yelling, maybe the punching of the wall. And you know that you may not know, but I'll tell you that you're on a path to actually being the one punched instead of the wall.
Yeah,
That's where the cycle of violence is going. So first you can agree or have a conversation, agreeing to have a conversation about these events. When you did this, it made me feel like this. Why did you do that? Why did you feel the need to do this? And the only way those conversations work are when both people choose to take accountability
for sure.
for their actions. When I say, why did you scream at me like this? And your response is, because you're a damn idiot. And sometimes you say stupid stuff, or you did this and what's wrong with you? Well, then that's not going to get anywhere.
Yep.
And when you set boundaries, maybe a couple of those kinds of conversations and punching holes in the wall are your alarms to leave the relationship. See, that's why I'm not a relationship coach, because I'll tell you to leave. I'll be like, I know a solution for this problem.
Yeah. Well, I was actually, I asked you that question specifically, even though I kind of knew your answer, because it is boundaries. And I'm so glad you talked about it. Now, I think this is where people get hung up. And I do this exercise with almost everybody I work with. And one of the biggest questions I ask them is, do you even have boundaries? And what do those boundaries look like? Because there's different types of boundaries. And a lot of people aren't even aware of this. We have porous boundaries, right? There's three main types of boundaries. So there's the porous boundaries. So those are like where there's really no boundaries, like everybody comes in and goes out, like it's porous, right? So you can come and go as you please. But then we have rigid boundaries where there's like these massive concrete walls, right? You don't let anybody in. Nobody can talk to you. Nobody can help you work through your issues. And then we have healthy boundaries. And so those are the three main ones. And we all really, our goal is to get to the healthy boundaries where we are able to say no, and say no confidently and without guilt. And with that, even with our spouses and our family members. And that is what a healthy boundary and relationship looks like. And so I do this little exercise. And for anybody who's listening here, start to list the people in your life and then put them into the
Yes.
categories. Where are they? Are they under a porous? Because sometimes we can have a mix, right? Like we know we have more healthy boundaries, let's say with our team members at work. We have healthy boundaries there, but when we go out for dinner with them, we have a little bit more porous boundaries. We're out there for fun, we're having a good time, everything's not so rigid. And so we can have a mix, but I would list the people in your life, especially the top 5 that you spend the most amount of time with, and tell me where your boundaries are with them. And if you are anywhere either porous or rigid, the goal is to move you into the healthy boundary lane. And we do this, and I was talking about, I skipped over it too fast, but this is the frequency part of it, right? And this all plays actually a huge role in all of this. We know, studies have shown, that we're all energy and we carry frequencies. You've heard me talk about it a gazillion times now, Charleston. But
Yes.
when you enter into a relationship and you're dealing with, no self-esteem, self-doubt, shame, comparison, fear, grief, anger, you're already vibrating really, really low. Shame is about 20, grief is about 75 megahertz in your body, fear is 100, and anger is 150. And when you are stuck in these low vibrations, and now you're paired up with a partner who also is resonating at these vibrations, that is destruction right there. And so the self-awareness and the emotional intelligence component aspect of it allows you to move and shift from these low vibrating frequencies. So now we're not talking about 20 or 75 or 100 or 150. Now we're talking about 400, 500. This is where healthy boundaries take place. This is where the self-awareness takes place. And so my whole goal when I work with people is to get them to shift from those low vibrations up to the higher vibrations, because when they do that and they combine it with the whole emotional intelligence component of it, they are able to see the destruction from a mile away. They won't enter into a relationship when they notice these little things because they are so in tune with their self. This all comes down to self-awareness. So I know we're going to close out soon. I know we had a little bit of tech issues. We're almost at 45. I want to keep it at 45 because I know that people are working and doing their stuff. But as for some resources, I know here in Canada, we have places like domesticshelters.org. We have the Canadian Association of Social Workers. We have justice.gc.ca. And we also have an app here in Canada. It's called My Plan Canada. It's an awesome little free resource. And after this is done, I am going to put a list of phone numbers. I'm going to separate it by province here in Canada. So if anybody needs some help, they're looking to reach out to anybody, I definitely will put the numbers there for you below. And if you know somebody, we all know somebody who is suffering in silence. Like I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, Charleston, about being the voice and speaking the voice and being an advocate. Get them to either tap into you or I, or to use any of the resources below. I think that would be an amazing contribution. So.
Well, thank you for those resources, and I'm grateful you're going to put them in the comments because I have a banner of resources here, but that's for the U.S. So
Yes, yeah, we have a lot. Actually, I will say in Canada here we have some amazing resources. Actually, I had posted that we were going to go live and do this special presentation, just short and sweet. And I had, I guess, somebody on Instagram saw it because of the hashtags. I put in like 30 hashtags, and I had all of these amazing nonprofit organizations and people reaching out to me. So there is a lot of help out there for people.
yeah, so what I wanted to add is you said this is what I think about a lot because we talk about money all the time. Recession, depression, stock market, blah blah blah, and you always hear about the top 5 people you hang around. If the
Yes.
top 5 people you hang around are millionaires, you'll be the sixth. Well, going back to what you said, if the 5 people you hang around the most are miserable,
Yeah,
you will be the sixth. If the top
absolutely.
5 people you hang around the most are violent, insecure, lonely, you will be the sixth. And
Absolutely.
so, and the thing about it is that everybody wants everyone else to be happy and live a full life. You can have 4 or 5 people sitting around and they're all depressed, and all of these depressed people want everyone else to be happy. And I say that because you need to understand that when you're sitting there lonely, depressed, sad, insecure, hating yourself, judging, doubting yourself, if you do the work to elevate yourself, it's not just for you. It is also
Absolutely.
for those 5 people that you hang around.
Absolutely.
Self awareness is the foundation of elevating yourself. And so, if you don't like sitting in doubt, shame, guilt, then you need to find a way to get over it. And I say that it sounds shallow, but I say it like that because we don't have another hour for me to talk
No,
about how to get out of it.
no. But
Um,
maybe we probably should, because you and I both know we don't speak from advice, we speak from experience. I was that girl
yeah.
that sat
Well,
in a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And you know my story. Everybody here watching probably does. And so I am an example of what happens when you bet on yourself. And I don't think it sounds shallow. I think sometimes people need to hear that raw wake up call. Not that it doesn't hurt, right? We've all been there. We've had moments. And there are times that I didn't even want to be here at all. So I know. But sometimes somebody just has to come and say, that's it. You deserve this, and show you the way. And I remember my mom, we were talking about old phrases the other last week, I think it was. My mom always used to say when we were young kids, if you hang around a thief, you become a thief. You hang around a liar, you become a liar. So choose appropriately who you hang around with. And it really does come back to the 5 people that are around you. And if you are hanging around people that have no drive for life, they don't want to do anything in the personal development lane, they're not looking to grow, to expand, to unlock their gifts, then you're in the wrong place. And sometimes we just need to kind of sit back and look at our life and say, you know what, I'm going to make a different choice. And being around the right people is the starting point. I'm very, very intentional who I have in my life and in my circle, especially my inner circle. And they're usually people who challenge me. They're usually people that I learn from, that I respect, that I value, and that can make me want to become a better human being, a better wife, a better friend. So that's super, super key. I'm glad that you mentioned that before we get off.
Well, I'll say this. You when I met you, I believe we met over a year ago. Um,
Yes.
but having you in my life has elevated my confidence, has
Uh,
elevated my self-worth and how I feel about myself. And it wasn't intentional. I wasn't taking your classes and workshops. It's just the way that we interact and feel when we hang around these people who are positive in our lives. And I'm in Florida, you're in Canada. The reason I say that is because some of you may feel like you don't have a choice. At work, the people suck. At home, the people suck. Or maybe you're alone and there's nobody at home and you don't have any friends. I can tell you now that all of the best friends in my life live a minimum 2 hours from
yes.
here. But
Yes.
there are some in Arizona, there's some in California, there's Toronto, Canada, as you can see right now. Find ways to connect with more people. Facebook groups, Instagram, various groups. And then there's also the content that you consume.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're miserable and lonely, maybe put a little more time and effort into watching positive YouTube videos.
100%.
I would say watch some Brene Brown, watch some Brendan Bouchard, watch some Eric Thomas.
Ed Milet.
Yes. Oh, Ed Ed Milet.
Ed
Yeah, he
Milet.
moves. When I hear him talk, he moves me. There's no
Yeah.
doubt.
And
Um,
actually, somebody who's become a fan favorite, I've become a fan of, is Dr. Andrew Huberman, Huberman Labs. Oh, what a phenomenal human being. It's just actually, I like that. I'm so happy you said that. So, what we put our attention on grows. We've all heard Tony Robbins spit that out of his mouth a million times, but it is so true. And if you are only focusing on all of the shame, the guilt, the violence, the anger, it's just going to grow. So, do be really intentional. Not only am I intentional who's around me, I'm intentional what I watch on social media. I'm intentional with the books that I read. I'm very, very intentional, and what you feed will grow. So great point there, Charleston.
well, I want to add to that. You say you're very intentional about what you watch. This
Mhm.
going back to self awareness. This is something I did a couple years ago, and I realized I was doing it right. Um, I went back and I looked at Facebook. I was posting on Facebook all the time. There's so much stuff going on in the world. And then looking at the reactions that I got, right? And you can choose smiling emoji, laughing emoji, anger emoji, whatever. And I would see so many reaction emojis that were anger, sadness,
Yeah.
things like that. So I realized, regardless of my message, regardless if I'm trying to inform the public or whatever, I was putting out negative energy and
Yep.
I needed to change that.
Yep.
And so that's part of self-awareness, recognizing what am I putting out. And then when you look at
Yep.
what you're taking in, you said you're very intentional about what you consume.
That's right.
It's not always about let me educate myself, let me elevate my self-awareness. How much of the content that you consume allows you to laugh?
Yes. Yes.
How often do you spend laughing and smiling?
Yep.
And so pay attention to which emotions you feel most often. And if you don't like that ratio, then change it.
Absolutely.
And what you need to know is that you are worthy of that change. You don't deserve to be
Absolutely.
sad. Oh, you're upset about something that happened last Tuesday or 12 years ago. It doesn't matter. Don't
That's right.
judge yourself. You're worthy of the work. You're worthy of elevating your happiness. And everyone that loves you and cares about you wants you to do that as well. But they can't make you happy. You have to do it. Do it for you because you're worthy, and do it for them as well. Be one of the 5 positive people in their lives that elevates them. And with
Love
that,
it.
I'm going to turn it over to you, Tara. And if you don't mind, you can close us out. I am so grateful for the people, for the audience, and I'm so grateful for you, Tara, because you are
Aw.
everyone. Every time that I talk about you to anyone, the words that I use are love and light all the time. That's a
Aw.
constant. So,
Thanks, Charlton.
yes,
So I do apologize for the tech issues before we got in here, but I am grateful that we were able to do it. I wish we did have more time because there's so many layers to this, and this is really like nothing compared to all the layers and the depth that this can go into. But I do hope that some people got a lot of value from this, or even just a little bit, or maybe even had that moment of like that epiphany, like, oh my God, like, and I'm always free. You can reach out to me on DMs. I live on LinkedIn lately, and on Instagram at Tara_Murney and Charleston. Please reach out to Charleston. Charleston, I am so grateful for you. I am so grateful for the opportunity when the pandemic came. I think we met on Clubhouse for anybody who doesn't
yes,
know. And I think that app came out at the most beautiful, divine time when people felt alone and scared and so disconnected and just really wanted that sense of belonging and community. And I know a lot of people found it actually there. And on top of that, they met the most incredible human beings. I've met you, and I've met Christopher and Walt and Jock and a million other people. And so I'm super, super grateful that our paths have crossed. And I'm looking forward to doing this more often. We will nail down all the tech stuff. But I thank you for your time. And if anybody needs anything, please reach out. Like I said, I will put down a list of resources here in Canada by province for all of you. And until the next time, bet on yourself.